Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Scruffy Movies podcast. I'm Zach Wallace.
And I'm John Crocker.
Today we have one that when we first started talking about the podcast, it just we wrote down at least like 12 or 13 ideas or so, and this was one of them, of course, overarching the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But now we've had our Phase 1 podcast, we've done a Stan Lee podcast, we've done a Spider-Man podcast, we've done a Phase 4 speculation podcast, but now we are finally moving on from Phase 1, which came out months ago, to Phase 2, and we're going to be talking about all of the Phase 2 movies today, which of course encompasses Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Age of Ultron, and Ant-Man.
This is what I would refer to potentially as the lesser phase out of all of the Marvel phases.
I agree.
Some of my least watched Marvel movies fall into this phase. And then some of my favorite ones, one in particular as well.
Yeah, that's what Phase 2 is a conundrum for me, because I agree with you. It has some of my least favorite movies out of anything that they've put out, but it also has some of my favorites out of anything they put out. So it's just a weird conundrum for me.
Yeah, and let's dive into that a little bit. So, I would say that Iron Man 3 is probably the weakest of the Iron Mans, in my opinion.
I will disagree. I will say Iron Man 2 is the weakest. I actually like Iron Man 3 a lot. I understand why people didn't, and I think more people who have like the comic booky knowledge and stuff like that, I understand like why they didn't like it, but I really liked it the first time I watched it, and like every time I watch it now, I watch it at Christmas because it's one of those like non-Christmas movies.
Right.
Which we've talked about in our Christmas episode, but I do like Iron Man 3.
I mean, yeah, I like it, but it's a hard choice between Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3. It really is a toss-up. But when I was putting together my notes for today, I'd convinced myself that it was probably the weakest. And even, Thor Dark World is kind of in the same boat, like, depending on how soon after I've seen either one, I could say either which one, but I would also say that it's probably the weakest out of the standalone Thors.
Oh, yeah. I 100% agree with that.
Winter Soldier, probably one of my least favorite Captain America movies.
Wow, really?
I was never, like, there was a lot of awesome scenes. Like, that was the one with, like, the mind and the underground, like, shield computer and all of that, right?
Yeah.
So there was a few awesome scenes, particularly when they were, I believe, leaving that compound or one of the others. The huge fight scene that happened, like, that was awesome. I remember a lot from that movie, but I've just never been a big fan of Bucky. Like, never really liked his character. I know a lot of people love Bucky. I'm not a huge fan. And that whole movie, I mean, other than what, I think maybe we met the Falcon in it. Was that the first time we saw Falcon as well?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a +1 in the good column. But
it opened actually with meeting the Falcon. They're running around the fountain, and it's the on your left scene with Falcon.
Gotcha. Yeah. I still say that's probably my least favorite. Guardians of the Galaxy, however, is probably one of my favorite movies out of the entire MCU.
Yes, I agree. It is my second favorite now after Infinity War of the entire MCU.
Age of Ultron was, again, one of those, like, it's a great movie, but when you stack it up against the first Avengers and then the most recent Avengers, I mean, obviously it's probably the weakest. But it's great. I mean, it's a good movie, but when being compared to its bigger brothers, it's kind of hard to compete. And then I did love Ant-Man. I did love the original Ant-Man.
See, I actually had a problem with the first Ant-Man, and I did, and I do still like Ant-Man, but in the back of my head the whole time, I know that Edgar Wright was supposed to do it, and so I kept just seeing like glimmers of what could have been, and it just kept making me upset, and I felt like I couldn't like fully get into Ant-Man.
Well, sir, you brought baggage with you into the theater.
I know, and it's not the movie's fault, because I enjoy the movie as it is, but it just was something in the back of my head that was like, this could have been a lot cooler if Edgar Wright did it. And that's why I credit Ant-Man and the Wasp for and Peyton Reed now for taking what they did in the first Ant-Man movie and building upon it. And I like Ant-Man and the Wasp way more than I like the first Ant-Man.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there, but at the same time, it's also one of those scenarios where like they both have good things and they both have bad things. So I would really have to watch them side by side to say which one I like more. But that's such a hard choice. I did love Ant-Man and the Wasp. That was such a good movie.
Well, I kind of getting back to phase two, I think a lot of these movies showed kind of growing pains. I feel like, and even as much as they want to say they had a plan, because I'm sure they probably did, but in phase one, they were dipping their toes in the water to see if this would work, to see if people would come out and see it. Otherwise, I don't think we would have got Iron Man and Iron Man 2 like back to back. I think they would have saved Iron Man 2 for phase two, and then we would have just recently gotten an Iron Man 3, and they would have kind of split them up the way they have the rest of the core four of the MCU that started out as the Avengers. But so I think they're – go ahead.
I was going to say, and to their credit, though, I would say that one of the things everyone knows I like about movies is backgrounding and sort of filling in the blanks. And all of these movies may be the lesser movies because they did a lot of the world building and introducing new people and sort of twisting the plot around a little bit, like seeding what was coming in the future, so they were as utilitarian as far as the MCU goes, as far as, as well as entertaining, I guess would be the phrase there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do, because that's kind of was the point I was getting to, is I think that after the first phase, and especially after the very first Avengers movie, Marvel was like, okay, we have, like, there's a hit on our hands. Okay, how do we expand this and build it and get more people in and do some of this world building, like you say. And so I do think phase two was more of like okay, now we're transitioning from like the more standalone stuff to now it's going to start like really like interconnecting with each other until we get to phase three, which I think has been like knockout after knockout. There hasn't been a bad one in the bunch yet of phase three. But yeah, phase two, I think, and it also just kind of felt disconnected for me, because another big problem I had with it was, and phase three so far has been really good about talking about this, is leading up to the first Avengers, I didn't mind if they were all in their own individual movies. They didn't know each other. They might have been aware of each other, but they didn't like know each other yet. So I was cool. They didn't have to see each other. But every time in Iron Man 3, in Thor the Dark World, and Captain America the Winter Soldier, I was just sitting there going like, why don't you call the other Avengers? Like, why every issue in all of those movies is potentially world ending? And I was like, now you know each other. Just like give them a call. Hey, I need some help. And so far, every phase three movie has been really good about like, they have another hero helping with them, or they don't have a way to contact anybody, or they at least mention like, hey, we should contact these people. And they're like, well, we can't, we have to do this because of this. But I feel like phase two didn't really address that. Phase two is just kind of like, yep, and now here they are back again in their own movies. And it didn't really talk about why they wouldn't reach out for help.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big part of phase three, was explaining away a lot of that, like, which, I mean, the examples that come to mind are, which I guess would actually be a little bit later on, but like the house arrest thing with Hawkeye and Ant-Man for sure. And it's like, oh, they're off doing other things, and it actually explains to you, why they're not there. So
well, that's not even until phase three starts. That happens because of Civil War.
Yeah. Yep. That's true. But so it plays a lot into the later movies, though. Like some of the, they actually take time out of those movies to explain why the others are not there. And in phase two, I agree with you. It's like they just sort of, they were just moving along with movie production and sort of creating the scene, and not necessarily as concerned with what's happening in that world right there, or right at that time, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I think. And that it's I think it's going to end up being another one of those that I've talked about on this podcast before, but in every horror movie where either they have to set it before cell phones or there has to be at least one character that takes their cell phones out and goes, oh, no reception.
No reception, yep.
It's gonna be another one of those. It's going to be like a why can't we call the rest of the guys? And they have to be like, it's because of this. I'm going to eventually get tired of hearing it, but if they don't put it in the back of my mind, every movie I'm going to be like, well, why didn't they call those guys?
And people like you and I are the reason why they have to go out of their way just a little tiny bit to put that in there. Like that little bit of fan service is all we really need to be convinced.
It's the cell phone issue.
Yes, the horror movie cell service issue.
It's the exact same. I'm tired of hearing it in every horror movie I watch, but if they didn't do it, I'd be much more mad than them putting it in.
Yeah, exactly.
They have.
So, out of all of these, I think it's pretty easy to guess which one is both of our favorites. Yes. So which one is probably like your least favorite out of the entire list? I don't want to go too negative with this podcast either. We can definitely talk about the awesome things with each of them, but our answers are going to be the same for the favorite.
Yeah, my least favorite is probably my least favorite of the entire MCU, and it's Thor: The Dark World. And Thor: The Dark World has a lot of really good action, a lot of really good comedy. Surprised me how much I laughed at that movie the first time I went to go see it. But I think that it suffered a lot from the villain, which was Malekith, the Dark Elf. I'm pretty sure that's his name. See, it's a problem that I don't remember his name.
Yeah, big bad elf. He's the big bad guy.
Exactly. And his only motivation the entire movie is, well, he is a dark elf, and they're evil. Like, he doesn't have any motivation besides that. And I do think that movie does a lot of stuff right. I really like the relationship between Loki and Thor. I really like all of the people from the first Thor movie getting to come back and kind of be in a little bit more before they're kind of dropped off after Thor has like a soft reboot of his own in Ragnarok. But I do think The Dark World does a lot of good stuff, but I just think overall compared to every other movie, if you don't have a good villain, it kind of takes you out of it because you don't really care if they get defeated or not. You hope their plan is foiled, but you're just like there's no emotional stakes, you know? Like there's some, I rewatched yesterday Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and there came a point where in my head, and I've seen the movie 3 or 4 times maybe, and still in my head at the final fight, I was like, oh, you better get this guy, Peter. Like, I wanted Ego to go down. And Thor: The Dark World just doesn't have that.
Yeah, I mean, I would maybe, and I could be totally wrong on this. I mean, I agree that it does have a pretty weak villain. I think you can get away with that more in Thor because of the background with Asgard and everything else. You can just sort of present the fact that there is this Asgardian lore and everyone just goes along with it, that this guy's bad because of XYZ. And they, it's not necessarily a century-old war or something having to do with Odin or anything like that, like a previous battle. It could just kind of come out of the blue, and you have to be a little bit more willing to accept that because it's of another realm. But I think potentially, in my mind, yeah, the villain, the big bad guy was the elf. But Jane, the girl, the love interest,
yeah,
she was was fused with the ether or whatever you want to call it, the ether. So I think maybe that was supposed to be like one of the big emotional hooks, is it's not so much maybe about beating the bad guy as it is about saving the girl. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, the argument can be made that Civil War had kind of the same thing in Baron Zemo, where his plan wasn't to end the world. It was just to take down the Avengers. Like, he's like, I don't care who gets hurt as long as the Avengers break up. And so he was almost like a secondary villain just to the Avengers' egos and personalities themselves. So I guess, yeah, the argument could be made that it's supposed to be more about like Thor and Jane's relationship than really Thor taking somebody down. But I feel like the movie just really suffered because of that.
And if that were the case, then you probably wouldn't have the awkward scene where it was like, why do you come hang out with all your Avengers buddies, but you can't come see your girlfriend?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, no, I'm back on Earth. Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, and I'm kind of spoiled by now what we've seen after, because I feel like Thor has finally reached the character that like I want him to be. You know, if that makes sense, like in Ragnarok and in Infinity War, I feel like Thor has finally reached the like, yeah, like it makes me excited to see Thor. It makes me excited for like another Thor movie. Whereas when Thor: The Dark World was coming out, I was like, I'll go see it because it's an MCU movie, but I wasn't like, oh my God, another Thor movie. I can't wait. I feel like I've been kind of spoiled with what I know comes after now too. And it kind of makes me look on the first two Thor movies a little more sour than I used to before Ragnarok.
Yeah, I think I just kind of maybe saw it coming more. Like, I mean, obviously I didn't see it coming. I had no idea what they would do with Thor, or how big of a success Ragnarok would be, or anything like that. But maybe in the back of my mind, I was just willing to give it more credit or something. Because to me, I mean, one of my favorite things about that movie, and I just have to throw this out there while we're talking about Thor before we move on, is that you finally get to see his mom be a complete badass. And I thought that scene was really cool, where she was just kicking everybody's butts. Had to at least mention that.
Yeah. And that's kind of another thing too, is like that you do get more about Thor's family in the Dark World as well, because they focus a lot of the action on Asgard itself rather than like putting Thor on Earth or anything. They bring Jane to Asgard.
Yeah, and I feel like it's the sort of overplayed trope of Thor where him and Loki like put aside their differences and come together to defeat the bad guy. Like you're always going to have that bit of a duality with Thor and Loki, which, you know, from here on out, who knows what they'll be able to do with it because of the events of their most recent film. But up until that point, you kind of always knew that was going to happen between the two. And even when it didn't, you saw that it eventually would, kind of thing. I think that's maybe something that you have to do with Thor, and people might get upset if you did not include the Loki part and sort of getting in a brotherly quarrel and then, you know, hugging and making up and saving the world together. Like maybe that's too important for them just to totally abandon, which, I mean, I guess they have abandoned it in a few movies, but I think they need to kind of get further away from that, which Loki in himself has just never really been like my favorite villain either. Even when he was supposed to be a big bad villain, I just see him as Thor's whipping post.
Yeah, Loki always presented the issue of, and now I'm kind of glad, because going into Infinity War, spoiler alert if you haven't seen Infinity War, I wasn't hoping that anybody would die, kind of except Loki. I was like, he would be a good sacrifice, and he's had the same character arc too many times. He's had the same like, I'm good, just kidding, I'm so bad, and then he's like, oh, I got you guys, I'm sorry I was bad, I'm good again, oh, just kidding, still bad. Like that's been his character arc in every movie that he's been in. And so I was kind of played out with that, and I was like, all right, I understand, I like Loki the character, but his character arc needs to end. And now it seems like it's going to be more interesting, because I honestly don't know what they're going to do, but they've announced that Loki TV series for Disney Plus. So I don't know if that's going to be like before Infinity War, some of Loki's adventures, or like post Infinity War, but he saw how much like Thor went through. So he's like, you know what? I'm still dead to Thor. I'm not going to interact with him anymore. This relationship is over with. I don't want him to have to go through the pain again and stuff like that. So I don't know what they're going to do with him. Interesting thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be cool to see more of the trickster role, like, you know, played up to. Maybe do some more like I don't know, just be more of a street level trickster, like maybe not necessarily impersonating the, you know, being the king of Asgard or anything like that, but more of that like illusion style tricksterness, you know, that kind of thing, but be separated enough from the big events that are happening in the MCU that you can bring it down to be a little bit more street level. and actually just get to see him. Because you could make him out to be like a really, really badass villain if you strip away all of the other overpowered beings and items in the MCU. Like if you put Loki way down on street level, and I don't want to say like a street crook or a thief that's like dealing cards or whatever and hustling on the corner, but if he were to get down more to that role, then he really could be a badass and do a lot of really, really awesome things, while at the same time getting away from that overplayed arc that we've seen over and over and over again with his brother and the rest of the Avengers.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. The rumor for the Disney Plus show is that it's going to be like a time travel show, so showing how Loki has influenced human history throughout the years. So we might be getting that more like street level trickster stuff you want to see from that show. It's not, from the plot synopsis, the rumored plot synopsis that is out there now, that's kind of what it sounds like it might be, is him like playing tricks and doing stuff on the human level to mess with people.
Awesome. So I've already mentioned this, but probably my least favorite one, to jump a little bit here, is Winter Soldier. And again, I don't really have a great reason why. Never a big fan of Bucky. It's not a bad movie. It's just that when you're looking at phase 2, it's probably my least favorite. And I hate even saying that, because I love all these movies. But yeah, just, I don't know, something about it. Maybe I just need to go give it another try. But I think it's Bucky. I think I just don't like him. And anytime he shows up, I'm like, God, this guy again? Like, can we just move on, please? Like, let's not waste time trying to give Bucky screen time, because he's really not doing much.
See, that might be the difference. That might be why, because I like Bucky. He's not my favorite, but I like Bucky. I like the storyline they've set up with him and Steve and how it kind of played out in Civil War and Infinity War and all this stuff. And now, like, Steve basically just got Bucky, his friend, fully back in Infinity War, and then he lost him again. So I like the dichotomy that they set up from Winter Soldier to Infinity War that now will probably play out in Endgame, and we'll see Steve kind of really sad about Bucky all over again. And I just like his character. I think he's a really cool addition. I like the storyline that they came up with for him and everything. And I don't know. Before the Winter Soldier came out, I had a friend. We had just seen like the first Avenger, and I didn't know a lot about comic lore or anything then. And we went to like Target or something, and they had a Winter Soldier action figure. And he's like, "You know who that is?" And I was like, "The Winter Soldier." And he's like, "That's Bucky." And I was like, "What?" And it just, like, I remember it blowing my mind that they had brought Bucky back.
Well, and maybe that's, one of those faults that we always come back to, you and I, is that we are not huge mega fans of the comics over the years. And maybe Bucky's entire character is like playing to those people that understand the deeper meaning of his relationship with Captain America, and to them, everything about it is awesome. But just because I don't have that base layer of knowledge, perhaps just looking at it on the surface isn't as intriguing to me.
And I will say another thing, just specifically kind of for you, I know you're also a huge fan of like the comedy that these movies put in it, like the Star Wars movies and the Marvel movies and everything. You're a big fan of like the comedy and everything that they're able to kind of drop in throughout the more serious stuff. And Winter Soldier is not really that funny at all. It barely has any jokes, if maybe like one or two, maybe. But other than that, it's not very funny. So that might be another kind of detractor for you. Even maybe like subconsciously, you're like, I didn't laugh as much in this one. So maybe it's like I didn't enjoy it as much. It wasn't as like catered to my interest as maybe some of the other ones like Guardians of the Galaxy might be.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And It's a good segue there to probably both of our favorite movie from this phase.
Oh, easy. You ready? On the count of three, you want to say it. 1, 2, 3. Guardians of the Galaxy.
Definitely. I mean, literally, like the only notes I have underneath this one in my little note thing for today is just favorite movie, exclamation point. Like, that's all.
Yeah.
Because I know it's so great. I mean, we know, and the fans of Scruffy movies understands our love for the space opera, and we've already at least alluded to Star Wars once in this podcast. So I think I totally come at this with like jaded glasses. The first time I saw this, I was like, if it is just relatable at all to Star Wars or Firefly or anything like that, I'm going to be all in for it. And I mean, it just did not disappoint. A favorite movie, not only in this phase of Marvel, but definitely top 2, as you said, and the overall MCU. And even outside of that, I mean, this goes probably in my top 15, maybe even top 10 list of favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, this one was one I was like really looking forward to. I remember when they were kind of announcing the cast and everything of it, and I was like, okay, Bradley Cooper and Vin Diesel and Dave Bautista. And I remember thinking, and now poor Dave Bautista, I've definitely eaten crow for this, but when they first announced Batista as being in the movie, I was like, man, Marvel's really scraping the barrel with this one. They're getting like wrestlers in here. They got Batista. They didn't even get The Rock. They got Batista. I was like, man, whatever. And then watching the movie just like blew my mind. And I was like, well, okay, I take everything I said back.
Yep. And I think a lot of that credit goes to James Gunn, obviously.
For sure.
And we've touched on some of the controversy that's gone on in his life over the past year or so. But I mean, at this point, much like you are with The Rock, and like anything he touches warrants at least one good viewing from you, I'm basically sold on anything James Gunn does at this point forward. Like it will earn a view from me, if for no other reason than because of how badass Guardians of the Galaxy is.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a few directors that basically no matter what they do, I'm at least willing to check it out. There's some where it warrants a theatrical viewing. There's some where I'm like, okay, I'll wait till Blu-ray and I'll pick it up, or like I'll rent the movie, but I know I'm going to watch it. I have an interest in it. Case in point, Alita Battle Angel that just came out looks really cool. I know James Cameron did it, which is one of my directors where I'm like, okay, anything he does. And Robert Rodriguez actually directed it. So he's another one where I'm like, okay, anything he does. But it didn't necessarily cater to like my theatrical interest. So that's going to be one that when it comes out on Blu-ray, I'm going to be very interested in seeing it. But James Gunn is definitely, if available, going to be one of those like, okay, another James Gunn movie's coming out. We got to go to the theaters to see it.
Yeah, and I don't want to sidetrack too hard here, but Alita, I've been told, is certainly one of those movies that you want to see on the big screen if you can.
That's what I've heard as well. So I'm kind of kicking my feet and unsure of if I should go or not, but it might be of best interest to check it out at some point.
I think we should go.
We might should.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's make plans on our podcast.
All right. So yeah, I mean the one of my favorite parts of all of the Marvel movies ever, if you were just to break it down scene by scene, the dance off. I mean, come on.
For sure.
That's the linchpin. That's the cornerstone of the Guardians of the Galaxy movie for me, is that you live in this universe where all of these things are happening. Now, given the Guardians are far, far away and far removed, I guess, from knowledge of everything else that's happening at this point in time. Mm-hmm. But to come edit an MCU movie and end it with a dance off, you sold me. You had my heart from that moment on.
I think that entire scene as a whole, and even the scene kind of a little bit after that one, where directly after that one actually, where they're able to explode Ronan's staff and Peter jumps for the Infinity Stone. I tear up every time I watch that because it's such like a silent character arc for everybody. But it's like when everybody touches each other. 5 minutes ago, like 3 days ago, they were all just prisoners in jail together that all disliked each other. But they were like, well, we're together now. We have to work together to stop this from happening because they're coming after us because we were together when we were breaking out, because we needed each other to break out of the prison. And so just like the kind of silent, and especially when Drax is holding his hand out and you just see like the little tiny paw of Rocket come up and grab it in that scene and take some of the power too, because Rocket, even when they're coming up with a plan, is like, look at us, a bunch of jackasses standing in a circle. he was never like a big fan of it. So I just love that kind of silent character arc they're able to take.
Oh, what does that sound mean?
That sound means it's halftime.
Woo!
Okay, so if you haven't been listening to the podcast before, halftime is the part of our show where we take a break. We talk about some of the more recent movies we've seen, movie news, trailers, things like that, stuff we're excited about. And in our halftime show, we have been giving away a digital copy of a movie every week for the past couple of weeks. And that trend is going to continue with this podcast. And we're actually giving away something Marvel adjacent, which will actually be a part of the MCU now in the very near future, and that's going to be the digital code for Deadpool 2. So if you want to win a free digital copy of Deadpool 2, all you got to do is comment below the code word Katana, Katana, or send it direct message to me on Instagram. And if you misspell it, don't worry about it. I'll understand what you're trying to say to me. It's not a problem. You'll still be entered to win. You don't have to worry about the actual spelling of it. But again, the code word is Katana. Either write it in the comment section of the YouTube video below or direct message me at Scruffy Movies on Instagram with the code word, and you'll be entered to win a free digital copy of Deadpool 2.
Yeah, now in the comics, Deadpool's katanas were like enchanted or something, weren't they?
Maybe I just talked about how much I don't know comic lore, and then you come out of the gate swinging at me with comic lore questions.
Well, I was, you chose katana, so I thought maybe you did it. You knew a little something, but yeah, I'm pretty sure if nothing else, it's made out of like, vibranium or unobtainium or whatever the metal is in the Marvel universe. But I believe they also have some other weird enchantment on them as well.
I know that one katana's name is B and the other one's name is Arthur. So when you hold them together, their names are B. Arthur.
That's awesome.
Golden Girls fame.
Yes. Okay, so who's gonna kick off halftime?
I don't know. I don't have much to go on, and I'm sure probably some of ours might be the same. At least two of them I think might be the same. So why don't you kick us off?
Well, starting with one of the two that are probably the same, the Irishman teaser.
Nope.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Not at all.
So for those of you who have not seen it, we were blessed with a teaser for the upcoming movie called The Irishman, which is Scorsese, which is awesome in and of itself. But the best part is that they're getting back, sort of the gang back together with De Niro, Pacino, Pesci, among others that I can't think of right now. And we don't really know much other than it's supposed to be a classic mob movie, much like what we've seen in the past, Goodfellas, Godfather, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's a movie that's been on my radar for a while. I think they were searching for distribution for a hot minute. They weren't sure where they were going to go with it. And now it seems like, I think you and I were talking about it. It's like going to be in theaters for 2 weeks and then hitting Netflix.
Yeah, it's going to have a very limited theatrical window, and then it will go directly to Netflix, which, again, I've said this before, anything like that I'm a fan of. Like, I'm not sure how much of a fan of this particular setup with the 2 weeks in theaters and then directly to Netflix. Like, I'm going to have to fill that one out. But I do like the fact that they're rocking the boat on the stereotypical sort of like launching of a new film. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how audiences respond to that, because humans are not necessarily creatures of change. So
that's true.
We'll see how that kind of goes.
But especially with Netflix, they've done such a great job with, not only all of their movies, but switching things up, like with Bandersnatch and all of that. So I foresee that they have a solid plan and that things will more than likely go smooth. The biggest sort of question I have in my head will be, how aware is the general population that this is now a thing? Like, are there going to be people upset that they can't see this movie until, it's been out for 3 weeks and they go to look for it and realize it's no longer in theaters? Now I would assume most of those people would be actually happy, because when they Google why it's not there, they're going to see that when they get home, they can watch it for free on Netflix. but I'm still sort of, that's up in the air for me. I'm not sure, not totally sold, but I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so next trailer here is Dark Phoenix, which I believe we've at least talked about before, but they issued another trailer over the past week or so. And for that one, don't want to rehash that more than we need to, other than I just can't wait. It does look awesome. And there is at least one other X-Men film sort of in the pipeline. And then after that point, they will all become one, right? Like everything's going to be merging together.
Yes.
And the other one is The Group, and the name is escaping me, the title of the next movie.
New Mutants.
That's the one. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see what happens with the cast. I'm not totally sure. So that is something that you need to stay tuned for updates on in the future. Next one here will be Us, which I know that we've already mentioned this one on the podcast as well, the Jordan Peele horror movie. But man, like the more and more I see the trailers for this movie, the more excited I get. I just had to put it back on my list to remind everyone, because if it's not in theaters right now, I think it's coming really soon. And it's probably the first horror movie in like a really, really long time that I've actually wanted to go to the theaters and see. I mean, maybe Halloween, maybe the most recent Halloween, just because we actually talked about it like the week before it came out. But previous to that, I really have not been, like, no fire under my ass has been lit to go see a horror movie in theaters until this one.
Good. I'm infecting you.
You're rubbing off a little bit. And then finally, and I bet this is certainly going to be one on your list, so it'll be a good little segue here, is the Hellboy 2 Red Band trailer that dropped, which, I mean, everything that we saw in sort of that first trailer, first teaser, it looks like it is going to be that big and epic and awesome.
Yes, that one is definitely on my list.
Well, then I pass the torch to you, sir.
Okay, so yeah, kind of that one was one I had written down. Hellboy was a movie that wasn't really on my radar until the first one came out. I knew that they were making it, but it wasn't something I was like trying to keep up with all the updates on and stuff, like in game or something might be. I wasn't like going out and searching for information. I was just like, well, when it finds me, it finds me. And then watching the first trailer, I was like, yeah, looks interesting, looks cool. I'll go check it out. But you know, it wasn't anything where I was like, oh my god, I can't wait until this comes out. But now with this trailer, I'm starting to feel that a little bit more. I like that it's distinguishing itself from the Ron Perlman Hellboys, which the first trailer didn't really give us. It just looked like they were making another Hellboy movie that could be in the Ron Perlman continuity, just with a different person playing Hellboy. But now it seems like they're kind of distinguishing it from the others by now they're making it R-rated. They're actually going to talk the way they do in the comics. It's going to be super bloody and all this stuff. And I really like the characterization of Hellboy we get to see in this trailer as opposed to the first trailer. I feel like we didn't really get a lot of his character, more just like, hey, here's Hellboy. And it also looks sick that they're actually going to explore some of the like Hellboy origins and how he's the Prince of Hell or King of Hell, whatever that is. But they only kind of touched on that in the first two Hellboy movies. But now, I mean, in this trailer, he was riding around with a flaming sword and a flaming crown on the back of like a winged dragon through what looks to be hell. So that looks pretty sweet. And then, of course, I also have the Dark Phoenix trailer written down. This is one where and I've mentioned it on my Instagram and just talking to people just in my personal life and everything. I'm kind of sad that this X-Men franchise is ending. I really like the cast of characters they've assembled. I even liked X-Men Apocalypse, and I know that one was pretty well divided. A lot of people didn't like that one. I actually like that one a lot. I just really like the cast they've set and the characters they've set for this new team of X-Men. I feel like these are the strongest characters. Like, you can talk about Rogue and whoever all day, cool characters in the original, but like she can touch people and it hurts them. Okay. Like that's, and I feel like a lot of the main storylines of the original X-Men's were like Rogue can't touch people. And I was like, I don't care. But I really like this cast, and I'm kind of sad that It seems like it's ending with this movie being pushed back and reshoots and reshoots and reshoots. So I'm excited, but I'm cautious. I hope the reshoots didn't mess it up. I hope there wasn't a lot of studio interference, and I hope it finally comes out. I hope it just comes out and we're able to see it. And then New Mutants, as you had mentioned, currently, as far as I'm aware, doesn't even have a release date. They pushed it back to do more reshoots, and those reshoots have not happened yet. So there's rumors that it's just they're not gonna give it any more attention or money and just kind of drop it silently on Hulu around Halloween and be like, all right, here it is. That's one of the rumors. Hopefully that's not true. Although I wouldn't mind if they just released it straight to DVD or something and I can pick it up, watch it, put it in my collection, get ready for the MCU X-Men. So I guess we'll see. It's kind of sad though that this franchise that we've known since 1999, I think maybe was when the first X-Men movie came out. For 20 years, it's kind of ending with a whimper and not with a bang. So
yeah, but honestly, it seems that I know they've had issues in the past, but with what's all the reshoots with both of these movies and all of that, and sort of the fact that it is going out that way, I think it was the perfect time for Marvel to scoop it up and say, you know what, we're just going to bring it all home. And they've had some really, really awesome movies over the years, but if they're getting to the point where they can't even get their crap together, for long enough to get Dark Phoenix, which, I mean, you should have the best time ever, like making that movie. Like, you know what I mean? Like that should not be a difficult thing to do in my mind and in my humble opinion. So I think that it's probably a good thing that it's happening now and that they're not just going to drag their feet and do this to 2 or 3 more movies in the future.
Yeah, I see. And I still might be surprised. They might both be really great movies. So, I mean, I'm still looking forward to seeing them, and I guess we'll see when they come out. I'm going to be there opening day anyway. So, and then finally, the last thing on my list is Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, which is the new Jay and Silent Bob movie. I believe we've mentioned it a couple times before on this podcast. Started shooting this week. Kevin Smith wrote and is back behind the wheel directing, and I am just super excited for that. Though the View Askewniverse, as it's known, so like Clerks, Chasing Amy, Dogma, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, Mallrats, all of those movies are some of my favorite movies that I had growing up. I love the characters of Jay and Silent Bob. I feel like I've known the actors and stuff for so long and known so much about their personal life. I feel like they're more friends than anything else. And so it feels like I'm going almost to like a high school reunion to see Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. Like I'm seeing these old friends that I haven't seen since 2006, and I'm getting to see where they are in life now and what they're up to, and I'm really excited to check that out when it becomes available.
Do we have any idea what the plot or premise is yet?
What I have heard is they are rebooting, since comic book movies have now taken over Hollywood, they're in the process of rebooting Crumpman and Bluntman and Chronic, and Jay and Silent Bob hear about that, and they are not too happy when apparently their residual check does not come in the mail, so they are setting out to stop the production once again.
Awesome. I hope so.
And it's literally that's where it comes from. It's a reboot in the fact that they're having to stop a reboot of that, but it's also a reboot in the fact that it's like the same story they told back in 2003 or whenever Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back came out, but now it's updated for now, and it's a reboot of these characters, and they're new and older and probably still the same experience level, but it'll be interesting to see them again for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most Kevin Smith thing I've heard, is that it's a reboot about a reboot because it's a reboot, but it's really like an actual reboot.
Yeah.
That's totally up his alley.
Yeah. And I think we're probably going to get a lot of superhero in-jokes and stuff, and like the way comic book movies have been embraced now and everything, because they had that kind of touching upon that in the original Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, but it definitely wasn't as top of the mind as comic book movies have gotten now. So I'll be very interested to see all of the meta jokes and cameos and stuff we get from people this go around.
Totally. Yeah, that's certainly one to keep on my radar as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's
All
it
right.
for me. That's all of halftime this week.
Okay, so let's kick this back over to phase two. If there were maybe like one character or plot or device or anything at all from phase two that they really never expounded upon in the phases after that, what is something or someone that you would like to see more story about?
Hmm. Honestly, and I think that they're kind of capturing this with another Disney Plus series that I don't know if they've officially announced it, but it's heavily rumored and probably will be true. But Falcon is one of my favorite characters that the MCU has introduced. I love Anthony Mackie, and I love Sam Wilson as the Falcon. I think he's a great character. I think he's a great addition because he's not a person who anybody was coming after. He's not a person who was like, I got to put my neck out and get into this fight. In The Winter Soldier, Captain America just showed up at his door after having met him 2 times. And he's like, hey, I need your help. You're the only guy I know that might be able to help me and that I can kind of trust right now. And he was like, yeah, come inside. And he's been on Captain America's side ever since. He's just one of those guys that I think has a really interesting backstory. And I really like his loyalty to his team and his team members and everything. And I think he has a lot of interesting backstory that we haven't gone into yet. And hopefully that gets to be explored a little bit more in the Falcon and Winter Soldier show that is rumored to be in development.
And wasn't he the one that really kind of connected everybody with Ant-Man?
Yeah.
He was the I know a guy.
Yeah, he appeared in the original Ant-Man movie when Ant-Man was trying to break into the Avengers facility. He took on Falcon in a fight for about 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, see, that's not fair that Captain America gets Bucky and Falcon. Yeah, see, that's another thing I don't like.
Yes, 2 sidekicks.
Yes, 2 sidekicks. Well, Iron Man only gets War Machine and all of his bots, I guess. So yeah, I'm totally with you there. I'd love to see more on that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that for me, I like the Collector, and I think that they've used the Collector. I mean, I don't know if it would be like a MacGuffin, but he's just kind of like there because they needed someone to hold an item or to use as leverage, or some they could justify why he has Infinity Stones and that type of thing. But I just love the character. I love everything we've seen. Like when you go to, I guess his museum is what you would call it, to his actual collection.
Mm-hmm.
Or to his gallery, and you've got Cosmo and Howard the Duck and like all these other things in the background. And I believe the last time we saw the Collector, now I could be wrong about this, but I think the last time we saw the Collector, he was in an illusion that Thanos had. So I'm not sure if he was actually like hurt or anything actually from that illusion, or if it was really all fake and maybe he got out of nowhere alive. I believe Nowhere was the name of the port. Yeah. So I'm not entirely sure like where it stands, but as far as I can recall, he's still alive and kicking, or at least it hasn't been shown that he's dead. And I know in the lore, he has those collections scattered all over the galaxy. So I would love to see him playing more pivotal roles, because I love the way they used him in Guardians. I love the way they used him with a tool for Thanos. And they just need to expand on that. Like I would love to see a Collector miniseries. Like I think that would be an excellent character to just really dive in on.
Well, I think especially now, because we've gotten the Grandmaster with Thor Ragnarok, and they've said in canon they're brothers, the Collector and the Grandmaster. Jeff Goldblum from Thor Ragnarok and the Collector are brothers.
Well, they look they look just like each other.
Yeah, and they are like ancient beings. And now that I think Marvel is starting to go with more of like the more ancient stuff, I know we're getting an Eternals movie relatively soon. I think that would be really interesting to see more like almost like a buddy comedy of them like traversing through the cosmos, tracking down like one of the collector's lost items or something like that. I think that would make for a very interesting and funny show.
Or even like prequels too, because now I know that in Guardians the whole plot was that he was the one that was looking to purchase the Infinity Stone, I believe, but that was because he already had one and he was gifted that stone by the Asgardians because they did not want two in Asgard. If I'm recalling that correctly, then you could totally go into the story about him, you know, getting those Infinity Stones, or that first one at least, or something along those lines. Like there's gotta be an awesome story in that somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, as much as the collector might work against the good guys sometimes to kind of get what he wants, he's never been shown to be a bad guy. You know, like he never did anything when they gave him the Aether. He never did anything with it. He just put it in his collection. He just wanted to collect it. He never wanted like world domination or anything. He was perfectly happy with just his collection. And even in the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, when he sees Groot, he's like, you should allow me to pay you now so that I may collect your corpse when you pass away. He's not like, I'm going to kill you and put you in my collection. He's like, I will pay you money if you agree that when you die, of however you die, I just get to have your body to put in my collection. And so he's never been really like a bad guy or anything. So hearing his side of like why he might want the Infinity Stones, why he might even be kind of trying to hide them from Thanos or protect them from Thanos would probably be pretty interesting to figure out.
Yeah, and I'd 100% forgotten that he wanted to get his hands on Groot.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you first hear a little bit about like what Groot is. Like, doesn't he sort of refer to him by like the technical name of the race or something? And he's like, oh, I haven't seen one of these in forever. Like, or I forget how it went, but I remember that being kind of the first time anyone had looked at Groot and been like, oh, I realize who you are and how powerful you are, you know, whereas everyone else looks at you as a talking tree or walking tree.
Yeah. The only reason I distinctly remember that exchange is because I've used that exchange to show how interesting it is that that Vin Diesel actually put more into his character of Groot than just saying, I am Groot. Like you can hear the inflection in his voice when the collector's like, you must allow me to pay you now so I can collect your body later. He goes, I am Groot. And you can hear like the inflection and like how he says it of like, yeah, that's fine with me. Like you can tell what he says, even though he didn't say it. And so I've used that exact interaction before to show how interesting it is that like Vin Diesel actually put in character work and stuff to these movies instead of just walking up to Mike and being like, I am Groot. Okay, just do with that whatever you want to. I'm out of here. Give me my money.
Yeah, that just reminds me of the short that's floating around on YouTube where it's Groot, that dude from King of Thrones that only says his own name, and then like Pikachu all sitting at a bar together, or all sitting around a table having a conversation, and you can actually kind of tell what's happening. It's really weird how that works.
Did you just call Game of Thrones King of Thrones?
No, did I say King of Thrones?
I think you did.
No, my bad.
That would be an interesting crossover. Kevin James is now buying for the Iron Throne. He trips on his way to get there.
I see what you did there.
The King of Thrones.
Oh boy. Well, do we have any quick pitches for this week? I mean, I
feel like we kind of just did our quick pitches.
Yeah, and you know, it's not like we don't know where this goes after phase 2.
I was really like, before we got into this, I was sitting there and being like, man, what am I going to do for quick pitch? Man, like everything has been touched upon. Like every character has continued in some form. So I think kind of that was the perfect question of like, what do you wish they would expand upon? And that almost is like the quick pitch of the phase 2 franchise.
Yep. And ultimately, with all of the expanding upons that they could ever possibly do, I just really, really want them to knock them all out of the park with this Disney Plus thing. I mean, I would love to get huge, big blockbuster movies for all the different characters and all the different interactions and all of that. I would love for the collector to have its own movie, you know, as just like a true sidebar from the rest of the MCU. But I also realize that's probably never going to happen. But what could happen is that we get a lot of really, really awesome continuations and backgrounds and just stories all in of themselves with Disney Plus.
Yeah, that's why I'm really excited for it as well, because I think just financially Disney or Marvel, and then to a bigger extent Disney, just don't see the viability of some of these characters being on the big screen. They're like, people like this character, but can we make a movie out of him? Can we? So I really like the Disney Plus thing where they're now giving characters the opportunity to shine in their own series, limited series, however they're going to end up calling it, but giving them a chance to shine without having to take the risk of making an entire like $200 million movie based off of them. And then when it comes out, people like it, but no one really goes to see it.
Yeah, and I feel like with TV shows too, I mean, I say this, but there's been many counter examples, but I feel like you have the ability to put together a pilot, show it to some folks and say, does this suck? Yes or no. Now, unfortunately, some sucky TV shows still get made, but you're not being blessed with a budget based off of a script and a director alone, and then having the opportunity for it to completely bomb, therefore ruining the taste in your mouth for that character or whatever, for a very long time. So you have the ability to strike out more, or at least, collect a couple of strikes before you strike out when it comes to TV.
Yeah, like you could really be like, man, I kind of hate episode 3. Episode 3 sucks. It's not my favorite. We weren't in the right mind place when we were writing it, but we've already spent money. We've already started making it. But hey, I know we can redeem ourselves on episode 4. Whereas in a movie, it's kind of like, man, that movie really sucked. Hopefully I work again. I don't know if I will or not.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess that about wraps us up here for another edition of the Scruffy Movies podcast. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. As we've said in the past, Crocker and I are probably the most passionate together about Star Wars and then superhero movies. So these are always some of the more fun podcasts I have just making them. So hopefully that translates to you guys listening. Once again, if you would like to win a free digital copy of Deadpool 2, all you got to do is enter the code word Katana below on the YouTube video you're watching right now, or direct message me on Instagram at Scruffy Movies. Again, the code word is Katana, and you'll be entered to win a free digital copy of Deadpool 2. Please follow us on Instagram at Scruffy Movies.
And Crockalicious.
And please tune in next week. We're going to have a really cool one for you guys that I guess I've had it kind of on the back burner, but until I sat down and started thinking about some more stuff we could do, and then it came to the forefront of my mind, kind of did I go, oh, why have we not done that one yet? So it's going to be a really cool one next week, and we will see you all then.